The words came out of Sloane's mouth with such casual cruelty that I almost thought I had misheard her. We were standing in my own kitchen, the kitchen where I had raised my son, where I had cooked thousands of meals, where Robert and I had shared our morning coffee for 32 years, and my daughter-in-law was looking at me with those cold blue eyes, not a trace of warmth in them, telling me that I would be spending Christmas alone. "We've decided to spend Christmas at my mother's house this year," she said, examining her manicured nails as if this conversation was already boring her. "It'll be more intimate that way. Just Graham and me and my family. You understand, right? You'll stay here." I felt the words land in my chest like stones. Not an invitation to stay home, an order, a dismissal. In my own kitchen, 3 weeks before Christmas, my son's wife was telling me that I was not wanted, not welcome, not part of the family celebration. Graham stood behind her, silent. My son, my only child, the boy I had carried for 9 months and loved for 34 years, said nothing. He looked at the floor, at his shoes, at anything except my face. His silence screamed louder than any words could have. I am Delphine Mercer. I am 58 years old. I built a network of contemporary art galleries from nothing and sold it for more money than most people see in a lifetime. I raised a son while running a business, supported a husband through his academic career, and buried that same husband 4 years ago after watching cancer take him piece by piece. I have faced challenges that would break most people. But standing in that kitchen, hearing my daughter-in-law exile me from my own family's Christmas while my son refused to meet my eyes, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt completely, utterly alone. 5 seconds passed, maybe 10. The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. Sloane raised one perfectly shaped eyebrow, waiting for me to protest, to cry, to beg. That was what she expected. That was what she wanted. She wanted me to fall apart so she could tell Graham later that I was being dramatic, that I was making things difficult, that I was the problem. I took a breath. When I spoke, my voice was steady. "Understood, Sloane. Merry Christmas." Her expression flickered. Just for a moment, something crossed her face. Confusion, maybe. Disappointment that I had not given her the reaction she craved. Then the mask was back, that sweet smile that never reached her eyes. "I knew you'd understand," she said. "It's just easier this way. Less complicated. Less complicated. As if I were a complication. As if my presence at Christmas dinner was a burden to be managed, a problem to be solved by simply removing me from the equation." Graham finally looked up. "Mom, I'll call you on Christmas Day. We can do something the week after, maybe." Maybe. My son was offering me a maybe. After everything I had done for him, after the sacrifices I had made, after the $200,000 I had given them for their apartment down payment, I was being offered a maybe. "Of course, Graham," I said. "Whatever works best for your schedule." They left 20 minutes later. I stood at the window and watched their car pull out of the driveway, watched the taillights disappear around the corner, and then I was alone. The house felt enormous around me, all these rooms filled with memories of a life that no longer existed. Robert's chair still sat by the fireplace. Graham's childhood photos still lined the hallway. But the people who had filled this house with love and laughter were gone, one to death, and one to a woman who had systematically pushed me out of his life. I did not cry. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But the tears would not come. Instead, I walked to my study, opened my laptop, and did something I had been thinking about for months. I bought a plane ticket to Vienna. Robert and I had always dreamed of spending Christmas in Vienna. We talked about it every year, made plans we never followed through on because there was always something else, some reason to postpone. His work, my galleries, Graham's school events. We told ourselves we had time. We told ourselves we would do it next year. And then there was no more next year, no more time, no more Robert. The ticket cost $4,000. First class, departing December 23rd, returning January 2nd. I booked a suite at the Hotel Sacher, made reservations at restaurants Robert had circled in a travel magazine years ago, purchased tickets to a concert at the Musikverein. If my family did not want me, I would give myself the Christmas Robert, and I never had. I did not tell anyone I was leaving. Not Graham, not Sloane, not any of my friends. I packed my bags in silence, arranged for my housekeeper to check on the property, and drove myself to the airport on the morning of December 23rd. As I handed my passport to the agent at the check-in counter, I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt free. The flight was long but comfortable. I slept for a few hours, read a book I had been meaning to finish for months, watched the clouds pass beneath us as we crossed the Atlantic. When we landed in Vienna, it was early morning, the sky just beginning to lighten with the promise of a new day. Snow was falling gently, covering the city in white, and I thought about how beautiful it was, how Robert would have loved this. The Hotel Sacher was everything I had hoped it would be. Old-world elegance, impeccable service, a room that overlooked the Vienna State Opera. I unpacked my things, hung my dresses in the closet, and stood at the window, watching the city wake up. Christmas Eve was tomorrow. I would be spending it alone, yes, but I would be spending it here, in this beautiful place, living the dream Robert and I had shared. That afternoon, I went down to the hotel lobby to ask the concierge about restaurant recommendations. The lobby was busy with holiday guests, families checking in, couples planning their evenings. I was walking toward the concierge desk when someone bumped into me from behind, and I felt something hot and wet splash across my bag. I turned around and found myself face to face with a man about my age, maybe a few years older, with silver-gray hair and the most striking green eyes I had ever seen. He was holding an empty coffee cup and looking at my bag with an expression of absolute horror. "Oh my God," he said, his voice carrying the unmistakable lilt of an Irish accent. "I am so incredibly sorry. I wasn't looking where I was going, and I've just completely ruined your bag. Please, let me pay for the cleaning or a new bag or whatever you need. I cannot believe I just did that." He was so genuinely distressed that I almost laughed. My bag was a Hermes Birkin that had cost more than most cars. And here was this man, this stranger, looking like he had just committed a federal crime by spilling coffee on it. "It's fine," I said. "Really, it's just a bag." "It is most certainly not just a bag," he replied. "I know a Birkin when I see one. My late wife had 3 of them, and she would have murdered me if I'd done this to one of hers. Please, at least let me pay for the cleaning. And maybe buy you dinner to apologize properly. It's the least I can do." There was something about him, something warm and genuine and utterly without pretense. He was not trying to impress me or charm me. He was simply mortified that he had ruined a stranger's handbag and wanted to make it right. When was the last time someone had shown me that kind of simple, honest consideration? "I'm Theodore," he said, extending his hand. "Theodore Callahan, but everyone calls me Theo." "Delphine," I said, shaking his hand. "Delphine Mercer." "Delphine," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "That's a beautiful name. French?" "My mother was from Lisbon, actually. Portuguese, but she loved French names." He smiled, and the smile reached his eyes in a way that Sloane's never did. "Well, Delphine from Lisbon, will you let me buy you dinner tonight? Not as a romantic overture, I promise. Just as a genuine apology for assaulting your handbag with my coffee." I should have said no. I was in Vienna alone. I did not know this man, and accepting dinner invitations from strangers was not something I typically did. But there was something about Theo, something that made me feel seen in a way I had not felt in years. And besides, what was waiting for me in my room? An empty suite and a silent phone that would not ring because no one knew I was here, and no one would think to call anyway. "All right," I said. "Dinner, but I'm paying for my own meal." He laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "We'll negotiate that later. Meet me here at 7? I nodded, and he walked away with a wave, still apologizing over his shoulder for the coffee incident. I watched him go and felt something flutter in my chest, something I had almost forgotten existed. Interest, curiosity, the tiny spark of possibility. That dinner lasted 4 hours. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about his career as a diplomat, the years he had spent in embassies around the world, the memoir he was writing about his travels. I told him about my galleries, about Robert, about the life I had built and the life I had lost. He listened in a way that made me feel like every word I said mattered. He asked questions. He remembered details. When I mentioned that Robert had been a professor of European literature, he quoted Rilke in the original German and then apologized for being pretentious. My wife used to say I was insufferable at dinner parties, he admitted with a self-deprecating smile, always showing off my languages and boring everyone to tears. How long ago did she pass? I asked. 2 years, he said. Pancreatic cancer. It was fast, which was both a mercy and a curse. I felt my heart stop. My husband, too, 4 years ago, the same thing. We looked at each other across the table, and in that moment, something shifted. We were not just two strangers having dinner anymore. We were two people who understood a specific kind of loss, a specific kind of grief. We had both watched someone we loved disappear piece by piece, had both held hands through hospital stays and chemotherapy and the terrible, endless waiting. We had both buried a spouse and learned to keep living in their absence. Well, Theo said softly, it seems we have more in common than coffee-stained handbags. The days that followed were unlike anything I had experienced in years. Theo became my companion, my guide, my unexpected friend. We visited the Christmas markets together, wandering through stalls selling handcrafted ornaments and mulled wine. We attended the concert at the Musikverein, sitting side by side as the orchestra played Mozart and Strauss. We had breakfast together every morning, dinner together every night, and in between, we walked the streets of Vienna and talked about our lives, our losses, our hopes for whatever years we had left. On Christmas Eve, we dined at a restaurant Robert had circled in that magazine, a tiny place with candlelight and white tablecloths, and a menu that had not changed in 50 years. Theo ordered champagne, and when the clock struck midnight, he raised his glass to me. To unexpected meetings, he said, and unexpected friendships. I clinked my glass against his and thought about Sloane, about Graham, about the Christmas dinner I was missing at Judith's house. Were they thinking about me? Were they wondering what I was doing? Or had they already forgotten I existed, lost in their own celebration from which I had been deliberately excluded? It was Theo who suggested the photograph. We were sitting on the terrace of the hotel, wrapped in blankets against the cold, watching the lights of the opera house twinkle in the darkness. He pulled out his phone and held it up. "You look beautiful tonight," he said. "You should have a picture to remember this moment." I laughed. "I haven't taken a photograph of myself in years." "All the more reason," he said. "Come on. Humor an old Irishman." We posed together, his arm around my shoulder, the Vienna skyline glittering behind us. He took several shots, showed them to me, and I was surprised by what I saw. I looked happy. I looked alive. I looked like a woman who was exactly where she wanted to be, with someone who genuinely enjoyed her company. "You should post that," Theo said. "Show the world what you're up to." I hesitated. I rarely posted on social media. It had always felt like showing off, like seeking attention I did not need. But something about that night, about the champagne and the cold air and the warmth of Theo's presence beside me, made me feel reckless. Why shouldn't I post it? Why shouldn't I show the world that I was alive, that I was happy, that I had not crumbled under the weight of being excluded from my own family's Christmas? I posted the photo with a simple caption, "Christmas in Vienna. Sometimes life surprises you." Then I put my phone in my bag and forgot about it. 2 hours later, when we finally went inside, I checked my phone and felt my breath catch in my throat. 17 missed calls from Graham. 9 text messages from Sloane. Dozens of notifications from Instagram. Comments flooding in, messages piling up, my phone buzzing with an urgency I had not seen in years. The first message from Sloane was 3 words. "Who is that?" The second was longer, more frantic. "Graham is trying to call you. Answer your phone." The third revealed everything I needed to know. "People are asking questions. This is embarrassing for us." Embarrassing. For them. Not concern for my well-being. Not worry about where I was, or if I was safe. Embarrassment that their excluded mother-in-law had dared to have a good time without them, had dared to be seen in public with a handsome man, had dared to exist outside the box they had put me in. Graham's messages were similar. "Mom, what's going on? Who is that guy? Sloane is really upset. Please call me." Sloane was upset. Of course she was. Her plan had backfired spectacularly. She had expected me to spend Christmas alone and miserable, to call Graham in tears and beg to see him, to reinforce her narrative that I was a burden, a sad old woman who could not function without her son. Instead, I was in Vienna, looking radiant, with a distinguished man at my side and a smile on my face. I looked at Theo, who was watching me with gentle concern. "Everything all right?" he asked. I turned off my phone and slipped it back into my bag. "Everything is perfect," I said. "Would you like another drink?" For the first time in 4 years, someone was desperate for my attention. And for the first time in 4 years, I chose not to give it. To understand how I ended up alone in Vienna on Christmas Eve, ignoring frantic calls from my son and his wife, you need to understand the 4 years that led me there. You need to understand who I was before Sloan, who I became after Robert died, and how the son I raised slowly became a stranger who could not even look me in the eyes while his wife banished me from Christmas. My name is Delphine Mercer, and I was not born into money. My parents were Portuguese immigrants who came to America with nothing but hope and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. My father cleaned office buildings at night. My mother sewed wedding dresses in a tiny shop in Newark. They saved every penny so their daughter could go to college, and I repaid their sacrifice by building something none of us ever imagined possible. I opened my first art gallery at 32, in a small storefront in Soho that no one thought would survive. Everyone told me I was crazy. The art world was brutal, competitive, dominated by people with family connections and old money. I had neither. What I had was an eye for talent, a head for business, and a stubbornness that refused to accept failure as an option. Within 5 years, I had 3 galleries. Within 10, I had a network spanning New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. I represented artists whose work now hangs in major museums around the world. When I sold the business at 54, the number on the check had more zeros than I had ever dreamed of seeing in my lifetime. I was set for life, financially secure in a way my parents could never have imagined for their daughter. But here is the thing about success that no one tells you. It means nothing without people to share it with. And I was lucky enough to have those people. I had Robert, my husband of 32 years, a professor of European literature who never cared about money, but cared deeply about ideas and art and the life we built together. And I had Graham, our son, the center of our universe from the moment he was born. Robert and I met at a gallery opening when I was 25. He was there with a colleague, pretending to understand the abstract expressionist paintings on the walls while clearly having no idea what he was looking at. I found his honesty refreshing. When I asked him what he thought of a particular piece, he said it looked like someone had sneezed paint onto a canvas, and he was sorry if that was the wrong answer, but he had never been good at lying. I laughed so hard that people turned to stare at us. We had dinner that night, and I knew by dessert that I would marry him. Not because he was wealthy or connected or impressive in any conventional way, but because he saw me, not my ambitions or my potential or what I could do for him, just me. We were married for 32 years, and I never once regretted my choice. Robert was my anchor, my safe harbor, the person who reminded me that there was more to life than gallery openings and sales figures. He was also the most present father I had ever seen. While I built my business, working long hours and traveling constantly, Robert was there for Graham. School pickups, homework help, soccer games, all of it. They had a bond that was beautiful to witness. When Graham was born, I made a promise to myself. I would give him everything I never had. Not just material things, though there were plenty of those. I mean opportunities, experiences, the freedom to become whoever he wanted to be. I paid for the best schools, the best tutors, and eventually law school at Columbia. I supported every decision he made, even when I privately disagreed. I wanted him to know that my love was unconditional, that nothing he did could ever change how I felt about him. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I loved him too much, too unconditionally, and in doing so, I taught him that he never had to fight for my affection. It would always be there, no matter how he treated me. I would always forgive, always understand, always make excuses for his behavior. Robert got sick when Graham was 30. Pancreatic cancer, the kind that gives you no warning and no hope. One day he was healthy, planning a summer trip to Portugal to visit my family. The next day, he was in a hospital bed, and a doctor was telling us he had 6 months if we were lucky. We were not lucky. Robert lived for 4 months. 4 months of watching the strongest, kindest man I had ever known waste away to nothing. 4 months of holding his hand through treatments that made him sicker than the disease. 4 months of trying to be brave when all I wanted to do was scream at the unfairness of it all. Graham was there in the beginning. He came to the hospital, sat with his father, told him he loved him. But as the weeks went on, his visits became less frequent. Work was busy, he said. Sloane needed him, he said. He would come next week, he promised. Sometimes next week never came. Robert died on a Tuesday morning in October. Graham made it to the hospital 20 minutes too late. I watched my son stand at his father's bedside, looking at the body of the man who had raised him, and I saw something in his face that I had never seen before. Guilt. He knew he should have been there. He knew he had chosen work, chosen Sloane, chosen everything except being present for his dying father. I never blamed Graham for missing Robert's death. I told him it was okay, that Robert knew he was loved, that these things happen. I said all the right things because that is what mothers do. We protect our children from their own mistakes. We absorb their guilt so they do not have to carry it. But something changed after Robert died. Graham pulled away from me in ways I did not fully understand at the time. Looking back, I think he could not face me without being reminded of his failure. I was a living reminder that he had not been there when it mattered most, so instead of confronting that guilt, he avoided me. And Sloane made that avoidance very, very easy. I met Sloane 6 months before Robert's diagnosis. Graham brought her to Sunday dinner, introduced her as his girlfriend, and I tried my best to make her feel welcome. She was pretty, polished, with a smile that seemed rehearsed. I noticed how her eyes scanned our home, taking inventory of the artwork, the furniture, the obvious signs of wealth. I noticed, but I said nothing. Graham seemed happy, and that was what mattered. After Robert died, Sloane became Graham's primary support system. I understood that, even appreciated it initially. He needed someone to lean on, and if that person was Sloane, then I was grateful she was there for him. What I did not understand, not for a long time, was that Sloane saw my grief as an opportunity. While I was drowning in loss, she was consolidating her position in Graham's life, slowly but systematically replacing me as the woman whose opinion mattered most to him. The wedding was 18 months after Robert's death. I gave them $200,000 as a wedding gift, enough for a down payment on an apartment in Manhattan. Sloane thanked me with that same rehearsed smile, and I told myself I was imagining the coldness in her eyes. I told myself she was just nervous, just adjusting to being part of our family. I made excuses for her because the alternative was admitting that my son had married someone who did not like me. The exclusions started small. A dinner invitation rescinded at the last minute because Sloane was not feeling well. A birthday gathering I was told about only after it had already happened. A Thanksgiving where I was seated at the far end of the table while Sloane's mother, Judith, held court at Graham's right hand. Each time, I told myself it was coincidence, misunderstanding, nothing personal. But it was personal. It was always personal. Judith Whitmore is everything I am not. Loud where I am reserved, demanding where I am accommodating, convinced of her own importance in a way I have never been. She raised Sloane to believe that marriage is a competition, that mothers-in-law are threats to be neutralized, that a wife's job is to secure her position by any means necessary. Sloane learned those lessons well. Over 3 years, I watched my relationship with Graham deteriorate. He stopped calling unless prompted. He forgot my birthday twice. He canceled plans so often that I stopped making them. When I tried to talk to him about it, he became defensive. I was being too sensitive, he said. Sloane was under a lot of pressure at work. Her mother was going through a difficult time. There was always a reason, always an excuse, always someone else's needs that took priority over mine. Last Thanksgiving was the moment I should have seen clearly, the moment I should have understood what was really happening. I arrived at Graham's apartment to find Judith already there, already settled in like she owned the place. Sloane barely greeted me. Graham gave me a distracted hug and then went back to whatever Judith was saying. I spent the entire evening feeling like a guest in my own son's home, invisible and irrelevant. At one point, I went to the bathroom just to have a moment alone. When I came out, I found Graham in the hallway. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Awareness of how I was being treated. For a moment, I thought he would say something, acknowledge what was happening, stand up for me in some small way. Instead, he looked away. He walked back to the living room, back to Sloane and Judith, and left me standing alone in that hallway with tears I refused to let fall. That was when I knew. My son saw what was happening. He understood. And he had chosen not to do anything about it. He had chosen peace with his wife over loyalty to his mother. He had chosen the path of least resistance, and that path led directly away from me. So when Sloane stood in my kitchen 3 weeks before Christmas and told me I would be spending the holiday alone, I was not surprised. Hurt, yes. Devastated, absolutely. But not surprised. This was simply the logical conclusion of 3 years of systematic exclusion. I had been erased from my son's life, one canceled dinner at a time, and now I was being erased from Christmas, too. What Sloane did not expect, what none of them expected, was that I would refuse to play the role they had assigned me. The grieving widow, the lonely mother, the sad old woman waiting by the phone for a call that never comes. I am Delphine Mercer. I built an empire from nothing. I buried the love of my life and survived. I have faced worse than a daughter-in-law with a mean streak and a son too weak to stand up for his own mother. And I was done waiting for them to remember I existed. The morning after Sloane delivered her Christmas verdict, I woke up with a clarity I had not felt in years. There was no confusion, no second-guessing, no desperate hope that maybe I had misunderstood. I understood perfectly. My daughter-in-law had looked me in the eyes and told me I was not welcome at Christmas, and my son had stood there and let her do it. The message could not have been clearer if they had written it in skywriting. I lay in bed for a long time that morning, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the woman I had become over the past 4 years. Somewhere along the way, I had shrunk myself. I had made myself smaller, quieter, less demanding, hoping that if I took up less space, there would still be room for me in Graham's life. I had accepted crumbs of attention and told myself I should be grateful for them. I had swallowed my hurt so many times that I had forgotten what it felt like to speak my truth. No more. I got out of bed, made myself a cup of strong coffee, and sat down at my computer. Within an hour, I had booked the trip to Vienna. First-class flights, a suite at the Hotel Sacher, reservations at restaurants Robert had dreamed of visiting. The total cost was more than some people make in a year, and I did not hesitate for a single second. This was money I had earned, money I had built through decades of hard work and sacrifice. If I wanted to spend it on giving myself the Christmas I deserved, that was exactly what I was going to do. The 3 weeks between booking the trip and actually leaving were strange. I moved through my days with a sense of purpose I had not felt in a long time. I went shopping for new clothes, things I would need for Vienna in December. Cashmere sweaters, a beautiful wool coat in deep burgundy, a new pair of leather boots lined with fur. I got my hair done, treating myself to the expensive salon I usually avoided because it seemed too indulgent. I bought new luggage, the kind with wheels that actually work and compartments that make sense. Each purchase felt like an act of rebellion. For years, I had been saving, being careful, thinking about what I might leave for Graham someday. What was the point? He had made it clear that my presence in his life was negotiable, dependent on Sloane's approval. Why should I deny myself pleasure now, so that I could leave more money to a son who could not even stand up for me? I did not tell Graham about the trip. Part of me wanted to see his reaction when he realized I would not be sitting alone in my house on Christmas Day, waiting pathetically for his phone call. But a larger part of me recognized that telling him would only give Sloane the opportunity to spin the narrative. She would make me the villain somehow, the dramatic mother-in-law, making a scene, trying to guilt-trip them. No, I would simply go, and they would find out when I was ready for them to find out. The days passed slowly. I kept busy with preparations for the trip, but underneath the activity, there was a current of sadness I could not quite shake. This was not how I had imagined spending Christmas at this stage of my life. I had pictured grandchildren by now, a house full of family, traditions being passed down to a new generation. Instead, I was planning a solo trip to Europe because my own son did not want me at his holiday table. I thought about calling Graham several times. Each time, I stopped myself. What would I say? Please, love me? Please remember that I exist? Please tell your wife that I deserve to be treated with basic human dignity? I had too much pride for that. And honestly, if I had to beg my own child to treat me with respect, then something was already broken beyond repair. A week before my departure, I ran into my neighbor Patricia at the grocery store. Patricia is 72, a retired teacher, widowed like me. We have been friendly for years, sharing occasional dinners and keeping an eye on each other's houses. She asked about my Christmas plans, and before I could stop myself, I told her everything. I told her about Sloane's words in my kitchen, about Graham's silence, about the years of small exclusions that had led to this moment, about the trip to Vienna that I was taking because I refused to sit alone in my house and feel sorry for myself. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the shopping cart and took my hand. "Good for you," she said. "Good for you, Delphine. I have watched you shrink over the past few years, and it has broken my heart. You deserve so much better than the way they treat you." I felt tears prick my eyes, the first I had allowed myself since that day in the kitchen. "I just don't understand what I did wrong," I said. "I tried so hard to make Sloane feel welcome. I gave them money for their apartment. I never criticized, never interfered, never gave her any reason to dislike me." Patricia shook her head. "You didn't do anything wrong. Some people are just takers, Delphine. They see generosity as weakness, and they exploit it. That daughter-in-law of yours recognized a good thing when she saw it, and she's been working to cut you out ever since. She wants Graham's loyalty all to herself, and she knows that as long as you're in the picture, she'll have to share." It was not a new thought, but hearing someone else say it out loud made it feel more real. Sloane had been systematically isolating Graham from me, not because I had done anything to deserve it, but because my very existence threatened her control over him. I was competition to be eliminated, not a mother to be respected. "What about Graham?" I asked. "How can he just let this happen?" Patricia sighed. "Honey, some men are just weak. They take the path of least resistance, even when that path leads them away from the people who love them most. Graham knows what's happening. He just doesn't have the backbone to do anything about it. It's easier to let you be hurt than to have a difficult conversation with his wife." We stood there in the grocery store aisle, two widows talking about sons and daughters-in-law and the complicated ways families fall apart. Patricia told me about her own son, who lived in California and called maybe 3 times a year. She told me about the daughter-in-law who had decided Patricia was too old-fashioned, too opinionated, too much. She told me about the grandchildren she had seen only twice in the past 5 years. "I used to cry about it," she said. "Used to stay awake at night wondering what I did wrong. But at some point, you have to accept that you can't control other people. You can only control yourself. And you're doing the right thing, Delphine. You're refusing to be a victim. That takes courage." I hugged her in the middle of the grocery store, not caring who saw. It was the first time in months that someone had told me I was doing the right thing. The first time someone had validated my feelings instead of telling me to be understanding, to be patient, to give Sloane more time. I needed that validation more than I had realized. The night before my flight, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, watching the clock tick toward morning, my mind racing with all the things that could go wrong. What if the trip was a disaster? What if I spent Christmas alone in a foreign city, feeling even more isolated than I would have felt at home? What if I was making a huge mistake, burning bridges I might someday want to cross again? But underneath the anxiety, there was something else: excitement, anticipation. The knowledge that I was about to do something completely unexpected, completely out of character, completely my own. For the first time in 4 years, I was making a decision based on what I wanted, not on what would keep the peace or make things easier for everyone else. I must have slept eventually, because the next thing I knew, my alarm was going off and pale winter light was filtering through the curtains. I showered, dressed, and double-checked my bags. Passport, tickets, hotel confirmation, credit cards. Everything was in order. Everything was ready. The drive to the airport felt surreal. I kept expecting something to stop me. A phone call from Graham, apologizing, begging me to come to Christmas after all. A flat tire, a snowstorm, some sign from the universe that I was supposed to stay home. But nothing happened. The roads were clear, the traffic was light, and before I knew it, I was handing my car keys to the valet at the long-term parking garage and walking into the terminal. Checking in for a first-class international flight is a different experience than economy. There are no long lines, no harried agents, No fighting for overhead bin space. A pleasant woman took my passport, printed my boarding pass, and directed me to the premium lounge, where I could wait for my flight in comfortable chairs with complimentary champagne and a selection of pastries. I sat in that lounge, sipping champagne at 9 in the morning, and felt like I was playing a role in someone else's life. The wealthy widow, jetting off to Europe for the holidays. It seemed like something out of a movie, not something that would happen to me. But it was happening. I was doing this. I was choosing myself for the first time in longer than I could remember. The flight was smooth and uneventful. I had a window seat with plenty of room, a meal that was actually edible, and a selection of movies I had been meaning to watch. I slept for a few hours, read for a few more, and before I knew it, the pilot was announcing our descent into Vienna. When I stepped off the plane and into the airport, I felt like I was stepping into a new chapter of my life. The old Delphine would have spent Christmas alone in Connecticut, waiting by the phone, hoping her son would remember she existed. The new Delphine was in Vienna, with no one to answer to and no one to disappoint. The taxi ride to the hotel took me through streets already decorated for Christmas. Lights everywhere, wreaths on doors, trees visible through windows. Vienna takes the holidays seriously, and even the gray December sky could not diminish the festive atmosphere. I pressed my face to the window like a child, taking it all in, feeling something that might have been joy stirring in my chest. The Hotel Sacher exceeded every expectation. The lobby was elegant without being stuffy, decorated with tasteful Christmas arrangements and staffed by people who seemed genuinely happy to be there. My suite was beautiful, all cream and gold, with a sitting area overlooking the Vienna State Opera. I stood at the window for a long time, watching the people below, the taxis and tourists and locals going about their lives. I was here. I had actually done it. That first afternoon, I walked. I had no destination in mind, no agenda, just a desire to explore this city Robert and I had dreamed about for so long. I wandered through the Christmas markets, breathing in the smell of mulled wine and roasted chestnuts. I stopped at a cafe and ordered coffee and cake, watching the world go by through frost-edged windows. I bought a small wooden ornament, hand-carved, something to remember this trip by. Everywhere I went, I was surrounded by families. Parents with children, grandparents with grandchildren, couples young and old, holding hands and laughing. It should have made me sad, and sometimes it did. But mostly, I felt a strange sense of peace. I was alone, yes, but I had chosen this aloneness. It was not imposed on me by someone else's cruelty. It was a gift I had given myself. That evening, back at the hotel, I went to the lobby to ask the concierge about restaurant recommendations. The place was busy with holiday arrivals, and I was navigating through the crowd when I felt the collision. Something hot and wet, spreading across my bag, and then a voice behind me, Irish accented and absolutely mortified. I have already told you about meeting Theo, about the dinner that lasted 4 hours, about the connection that formed between us almost immediately. But what I have not told you is how it felt. How it felt to sit across from a man who actually listened when I spoke. How it felt to laugh, really laugh. The kind that makes your stomach hurt and your eyes water. How it felt to be seen as something other than a burden, an obligation, a problem to be managed. Theo told me about his life over that dinner. His childhood in Dublin, his years in the diplomatic corps, the wife he had loved and lost. Margaret, her name was. They had been married for 38 years when she died, and he still talked about her with a tenderness that made my heart ache. He understood grief in a way that people who have not experienced it simply cannot. He knew the loneliness, the guilt, the strange mix of wanting to move forward and feeling like moving forward was a betrayal. I told him about Robert, about Graham, about the circumstances that had brought me to Vienna alone. I had not planned to share so much with a stranger, but something about Theo made it easy. He did not judge, did not offer platitudes, did not try to fix anything. He just listened, and occasionally reached across the table to touch my hand when the words got difficult. When the restaurant finally closed and we had to leave, neither of us wanted the evening to end. We walked back to the hotel together, the cold night air sharp against our faces, and made plans to meet for breakfast the next morning. The days that followed were some of the happiest I had experienced since Robert's death. Theo was the perfect companion, knowledgeable about Vienna, interested in everything, with a dry wit that kept me constantly entertained. We visited museums, attended concerts, explored neighborhoods off the tourist track. We talked for hours over meals, sharing stories and opinions and memories. Christmas Eve arrived faster than I expected. Theo and I had dinner at the restaurant Robert had circled in that magazine years ago. It was exactly as Robert had imagined, intimate and romantic and perfect. We ordered entirely too much food and drank an entire bottle of wine and lingered over dessert until we were the last ones in the restaurant. At midnight, Theo raised his glass. "To unexpected meetings," he said, "and unexpected friendships." I clinked my glass against his and felt something shift inside me. This was not the Christmas I had planned. It was better, so much better than I ever could have imagined. The next day, Christmas Day, we had breakfast together and then walked through the quiet streets. Most things were closed, but the city was beautiful in its stillness. Theo told me stories about Christmases he had spent in various embassies around the world. I told him about the traditions Robert and I had established when Graham was small, most of which had faded away over the years. That afternoon, we sat on the terrace of the hotel, bundled in blankets, watching the lights of the opera house. That was when Theo took the photograph. That was when I posted it, feeling reckless and happy and completely unconcerned with what anyone might think. The notifications started coming almost immediately, but I did not see them until later. Theo and I went to dinner, then to a jazz club he knew, then back to the hotel for a nightcap. It was nearly midnight when I finally checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Graham, 9 text messages from Sloane. My Instagram flooded with comments and questions. For a moment, the old Delphine surfaced, the one who would have panicked, who would have called back immediately, who would have apologized for causing concern. But then I looked at Theo, sitting across from me with his kind eyes and his gentle smile, and I remembered who I was choosing to be now. I turned off the phone and put it away. "Everything okay?" Theo asked. "Everything is perfect," I said. "Tell me more about that Christmas in Morocco." And he did, and the phone stayed off, and for one more night, I was free. The morning after I posted that photograph, I woke to a silent phone and a peaceful room. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting golden stripes across the bed. For a moment, I forgot about the missed calls, the frantic messages, the chaos I had apparently unleashed with a single photograph. I was simply a woman in Vienna, waking up to another beautiful day. Then I remembered, and the weight of it settled back onto my chest. I reached for my phone and turned it on. The notifications flooded in immediately. Dozens more since I had last checked. Graham had called 4 more times during the night. Sloane had sent 3 additional messages, each more agitated than the last. There were texts from people I had not heard from in months, old friends and distant relatives, suddenly curious about my life. And the Instagram comments kept coming, an endless stream of questions and congratulations and thinly veiled nosiness. I scrolled through Sloane's messages first. The progression was fascinating in a clinical sort of way. The first message, sent shortly after I posted the photo, was 3 words. "Who is that?" No greeting, no concern for my well-being, just immediate suspicion. The second message came an hour later. "Graham is trying to call you. Answer your phone." A command, not a request. The third message was longer, and it revealed everything I needed to know about what was really bothering her. "People are asking questions. My mother saw the photo and wants to know what's going on. This is embarrassing for us. Can you please call Graham back and explain?" I read that message 3 times, letting each word sink in. Embarrassing for them. Not worry about whether I was safe, whether I was happy, whether I was okay spending Christmas alone in a foreign country. Embarrassment. Sloane was embarrassed because her excluded mother-in-law had dared to have a good time. She was embarrassed because her friends had seen the photo and were asking questions she could not answer. She was embarrassed because the narrative she had constructed, the one where I was a sad, lonely old woman who needed to be managed and minimized, was falling apart. And Judith had seen it too. I could only imagine that conversation. Sloane explaining that she had no idea her mother-in-law was in Vienna. Judith demanding to know who the man in the photo was. Both of them spinning theories, working themselves into a frenzy of speculation and indignation. Good. Let them spin. Graham's messages were different in tone, but equally revealing. "Mom, what's going on? Why are you in Vienna?" as if I needed to report my travel plans to him, as if I owed him an explanation for how I chose to spend the Christmas he had excluded me from. Who is that guy? Sloane is really upset. Of course she was. Sloane was the priority, always. Her feelings, her comfort, her peace of mind. My feelings had never factored into his calculations. I played the voice message he had left. His voice was tight, stressed, a tone I recognized from his childhood when he knew he had done something wrong but did not want to admit it. "Mom, I've been trying to reach you all night. I don't know what's happening, but can you please call me back? Sloane is freaking out, and I just need to know you're okay. And who is that man in the picture? Is he... Just call me, okay? Please." He needed to know I was okay. That was something at least. But even in that message, even in his concern, Sloane came first. Sloane was freaking out. That was the real emergency. Not his mother alone in Vienna, but his wife's discomfort at being caught off guard. I sat with my phone for a long time, reading and rereading the messages. Something was crystallizing inside me, a understanding that had been forming for years, but had never quite solidified. My son loved me. I believed that. But his love was passive, convenient, conditional on my cooperation with the life he had chosen. He loved me as long as I did not cause problems. He loved me as long as I accepted the crumbs of attention he offered. He loved me as long as I stayed in the box Sloane had built for me. The moment I stepped outside that box, the moment I did something unexpected, something that did not fit the role they had assigned me, everything changed. Suddenly, I was a problem again. Suddenly, I required attention and explanation and damage control. Suddenly, I mattered, but only because my happiness had become inconvenient. That was the moment the shift happened. Not gradually, not in stages, but all at once, like a light switching on in a dark room. I had spent 4 years hoping that if I was patient enough, understanding enough, accommodating enough, Graham would eventually come back to me. I had believed that my love could outlast Sloane's manipulation, that eventually he would see what was happening and choose to change it. But Graham was never going to change, not because he could not, but because he did not want to. He had chosen the path of least resistance, and that path led away from me. Every time I had accepted an excuse, forgiven a slight, pretended not to notice an exclusion, I had made it easier for him to continue. I had taught him that my feelings did not require consideration, that my presence was optional, that my love was guaranteed no matter how he treated me. No more. I was done waiting for Graham to become the son I deserved. I was done hoping Sloane would have a change of heart. I was done shrinking myself to fit into a family that did not want me. From this moment forward, I would live my life on my own terms. I would make my own happiness, build my own traditions, find my own people. And if Graham wanted to be part of that life, he would have to earn his place. He would have to choose me, actively and deliberately, the way I had chosen him every day of his life. I looked at the phone one more time. Then I typed a response to Graham, the first communication I had initiated since the day Sloane banished me from Christmas. "I am fine. I am in Vienna. I am having a wonderful time. The man in the photo is a friend I met here. I will be home on January 2nd. We can talk then if you would like. I hope you had a nice Christmas." Short, factual, completely devoid of the emotional reassurance he was seeking. I did not apologize for not answering sooner. I did not explain myself or my choices. I did not ask about his Christmas or express any curiosity about how things had gone at Judith's house. I sent the message and then turned off my phone again. When I met Theo for breakfast an hour later, he took one look at my face and smiled. "You look different this morning," he said. "Lighter somehow." I smiled back. "I feel different. I feel like myself for the first time in years." He raised his coffee cup in a toast to finding yourself in unexpected places. I clinked my cup against his. "To unexpected places," I agreed, "and unexpected people." I returned to Connecticut on January 2nd, exactly as planned. The flight home felt different than the flight out. I was not the same woman who had boarded that plane in December, desperate to escape the humiliation of being excluded from Christmas. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had remembered her own worth. Vienna had given me that gift, and I intended to keep it. Theo and I had said goodbye at the airport with promises to call, to text, to visit. He was flying back to Dublin, and I was flying back to a life that would need significant restructuring. We did not define what we were to each other. There was no need. What we had found in Vienna was genuine, and genuine things do not require labels or explanations. They simply exist. The house was exactly as I had left it. My housekeeper had kept everything clean and watered the plants, but there was a stillness to the rooms that felt different now. Before Vienna, this house had felt like a tomb, a monument to a life that no longer existed. Now it felt like possibility. These rooms could become whatever I wanted them to become. This life could take whatever shape I chose to give it. I unpacked slowly, savoring the task. Each item I removed from my suitcase carried memories of Vienna. The scarf I had bought at the Christmas market, the program from the concert at the Musikverein, the wooden ornament that would go on next year's tree, a reminder of the Christmas I had given myself. I had been home for approximately 3 hours when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I knew who it was before I even looked out the window. Graham's silver BMW, the one I had helped him buy after his promotion last year. He was alone, which was interesting. No Sloane riding shotgun, preparing her talking points. I took my time going to the door. Let him wait. Let him wonder if I was home, if I would answer, if I would receive him at all. When I finally opened the door, Graham was standing on the porch with an expression I could not quite read. Nervousness, yes, but also something else. Irritation, maybe. Or was it defensiveness? "Mom," he said, "you're back." "I am," I agreed. "Would you like to come in?" He followed me into the living room, the same living room where he had taken his first steps, where we had opened Christmas presents for 30 years, where Robert and I had told him we loved him more times than I could count. He sat on the edge of the sofa, perched like he was ready to flee at any moment. "You look good," he said, and there was surprise in his voice, as if he had expected me to return haggard and broken, as if a woman my age could not possibly thrive on her own. "Thank you. Vienna was wonderful." He nodded, looking around the room, looking anywhere but directly at me. "Mom, we need to talk about what happened." "What happened?" I repeated. "You mean me going to Vienna? Or you mean your wife telling me I was not welcome at Christmas?" He winced. "That's not exactly what she said." "Graham." I kept my voice calm, measured. "I was standing in this kitchen when Sloane looked me in the eyes and said you would be spending Christmas at her mother's house and I would be staying here. Those were her exact words. You'll stay here. Not an invitation to join you. An instruction to stay away." "She didn't mean it like that," he started. But I held up my hand. "Please don't. Please don't insult me by pretending that what happened was anything other than what it was. Your wife excluded me from Christmas, and you stood there and let her. You didn't say a word. You didn't defend me. You didn't suggest that maybe, just maybe, your mother should be included in the family holiday." Graham's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the position I was in. Sloane's mother has been going through a really hard time, and Sloane wanted to be there for her, and she felt like having you there would be what?" I asked. "Awkward? Uncomfortable? What exactly is so terrible about my presence that your wife needed to banish me from Christmas?" He did not have an answer for that. Of course he didn't. There was no good answer, no reasonable explanation for treating someone the way Sloane had treated me. He could only offer excuses, deflections, attempts to shift the blame onto circumstances rather than choices. "And then you went to Vienna," he said, changing tactics, "without telling anyone, without letting me know where you were. Do you have any idea how worried I was when I saw that photo and realized you weren't even in the country?" "Worried?" I let the word hang in the air. "You were worried? When exactly did that worry begin, Graham? Before or after Sloane saw the photo and got upset? Before or after people started asking questions? I read your messages. I listened to your voicemail. Every single one of them mentioned Sloane's feelings. Not once did you ask if I was happy, if I was having a good time, if I was okay. You only wanted to know about the man in the photo and when I would call back to calm your wife down." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me, Graham, in the 3 weeks between Sloane telling me to stay home and Christmas Day, how many times did you call me? How many times did you check in to see how I was doing, knowing that I would be spending the holiday alone? Silence. The answer is zero, I said. 0 calls, 0 texts, 0 indication that you cared at all about how I would spend Christmas. You only started caring when I posted a photo that made you uncomfortable, when my happiness became an inconvenience for your wife. Graham stood up, pacing the room. This is exactly why Sloane has a hard time with you. You twist everything around. You make yourself the victim when all she was trying to do was have a nice holiday with her family. I let that sink in. Her family. As if I were not Graham's family. As if 34 years of being his mother had been erased by 3 years of marriage. Sit down, Graham, I said quietly. Something in my tone made him obey. He sat back down on the sofa, his posture still rigid, his expression still defensive. I am going to tell you some things now, I said, and you are going to listen without interrupting. When I'm finished, you can say whatever you want, but right now, you are going to hear me. Do you understand? He nodded, though he did not look happy about it. For 3 years, I have watched your wife systematically push me out of your life. It started small. Dinners canceled at the last minute. Birthday cards that never arrived, invitations extended and then rescinded. Each time, I made excuses for her. She was stressed. She was busy. She didn't mean it. I made those excuses because I loved you, and I didn't want to put you in the middle of a conflict. Graham shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. I gave you and Sloane $200,000 for your apartment. A gift, freely given, because I wanted to help you build your life together. Do you know how many times I've been invited to that apartment for dinner? 3 times in 3 years. 3 times. And each of those times, I felt like an intruder in my own son's home. Your mother-in-law, on the other hand, seems to have a standing invitation. Judith lives closer, he said, unable to help himself. Judith lives 45 minutes away. I live 50 minutes away. That's not a reason, Graham. That's an excuse. He fell silent again. Last Thanksgiving, I spent the entire evening being ignored. Sloane barely spoke to me. You were so busy attending to Judith that you hardly noticed I was there. At one point, I went to the bathroom just to have a moment alone, and when I came out, you were standing in the hallway. You looked at me, and I saw in your eyes that you knew exactly what was happening. You knew how I was being treated, and then you walked away. You went back to the living room and left me standing there alone. Graham's face had gone pale. He remembered that moment. I could see it in his eyes. I cried myself to sleep that night, I continued. Not because of Sloane. I expect nothing from Sloane. But because my own son, the child I raised and loved and sacrificed for, saw his mother being hurt and chose to do nothing about it. Mom, I didn't know it was that bad, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Yes, you did. You knew. You just chose not to see it, because seeing it would have required you to do something about it. And doing something about it would have meant having a difficult conversation with your wife. So you took the easy path. You let me be hurt because it was more convenient than standing up for me. He put his head in his hands. I'm sorry. I know you are. But Graham, I need you to understand something. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you this because things are going to change, and you need to understand why. He looked up at me, confusion in his eyes. I am done, I said simply. I am done accepting crumbs of attention and being grateful for them. I am done shrinking myself to make room for Sloane's insecurities. I am done pretending that the way I've been treated is acceptable, because it is not. I deserve better. I deserve to be treated with basic respect and dignity, and if you and your wife cannot provide that, then I will find people who can. What does that mean? He asked, fear creeping into his voice. Are you saying you don't want to see me anymore? I'm saying that I will no longer chase you. I will no longer call and be ignored, extend invitations that get canceled, pretend that everything is fine when it clearly is not. If you want a relationship with me, you will have to work for it. You will have to choose me, actively and deliberately, the way I have chosen you every single day of your life. Graham sat very still. I could see him processing, struggling to reconcile the mother he thought he knew with the woman sitting before him. For years, I had been compliant, accommodating, eager to maintain peace at any cost. This new version of me was unfamiliar territory. And the man in the photo? he asked finally. Who is he? His name is Theodore. He's a retired diplomat from Dublin, and he's a widower like me. We met by accident in the hotel lobby, and we spent the holiday together. He's kind and intelligent, and he treats me with more consideration than I've received from my own family in years. Is this serious? I don't know yet, I said honestly. What I do know is that he makes me happy. He sees me as a person worthy of attention and respect. He asks about my opinions and actually listens to the answers. He makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt since your father died. Graham flinched at the mention of Robert. Good. He should flinch. He should remember the father who adored him, the father whose death he barely made time for. Your father would be disappointed, I said, and I watched those words hit him like a physical blow. Not in me for going to Vienna. In you, for becoming the kind of man who lets his wife mistreat his mother while he stands by and watches. Tears were forming in Graham's eyes now. I know, he whispered. I know he would be. Robert loved you more than anything in this world. He spent his life teaching you to be a good man, and good men don't abandon their mothers. Good men don't choose convenience over loyalty. Good men stand up for the people they love, even when it's hard. Graham broke then. The tears came freely, and he did not try to stop them. He sat on my sofa and cried in a way I had not seen since he was a child. I watched him, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet, but the beginning of something that might someday become forgiveness. I'm sorry, he said again, and this time I heard something different in the words. Not just reflexive apology, not just guilt, something deeper, something real. I believe you, I said. But Graham, being sorry is not enough. You have to do better. You have to be better. I will not accept words without actions anymore. If you tell me things will change, I will need to see that change. I will need proof. He nodded, wiping his face. I understand. I'm not asking you to choose between me and your wife. That's not what I want. What I want is to be treated with respect. What I want is to be included, not excluded. What I want is for my son to remember that I exist and that I matter. You do matter, he said. Mom, you matter so much. Then show me. Don't tell me. Show me. We talked for another hour after that. Not about Sloane, not about Vienna, but about the things we had never talked about. Robert's death and how it had affected both of us. The distance that had grown between us. The memories we both carried of happier times. It was the most honest conversation we had had in years. When Graham finally left, he hugged me at the door. A real hug, tight and long, the kind he used to give me when he was small. I love you, Mom, he said. I love you too, I replied. I always will. But I also love myself, and I will not sacrifice my dignity anymore, not even for you. He nodded, and I saw in his eyes that he understood. Whether he would actually change remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, I felt like there was hope. 2 days later, Sloane came to see me. She did not call ahead, just showed up at my door with that same artificial smile she always wore. But there was something different in her eyes, uncertainty, maybe even a little fear. Delphine, she said, we need to talk. I stepped aside and let her in. This conversation had been a long time coming. Sloane walked into my living room like she owned the place, but I could see the cracks in her confidence. Her posture was too rigid, her smile too fixed. She was nervous, and she was trying very hard not to show it. Would you like something to drink? I asked, gesturing toward the kitchen. Coffee? Tea? No, thank you. She sat on the edge of the armchair, crossing her legs at the ankle in that practiced way she had. I think we need to clear the air about what happened over Christmas. I sat across from her and waited. I was done filling silences, done making things easier for people who made my life harder. If Sloane had something to say, she could say it without my help. The silence stretched between us. I watched her struggle with it, watched her realize that I was not going to play the role she expected. Finally, she spoke. Graham told me about your conversation, she said. He was very upset when he came home. I imagine he was. He said some things that... She paused, regrouping. He said you felt excluded from the family, that you thought I was pushing you out of his life. I don't think that, Sloane. I know it. There's a difference. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she kept her composure. That was never my intention. I'm sorry if you felt that way, but I think there's been some miscommunication. There it was, the non-apology apology. Sorry if you felt that way. As if my feelings were the problem, not her behavior. As if the years of exclusion and dismissal were simply a matter of miscommunication rather than deliberate choice. Let me be very clear, I said, keeping my voice calm and measured. I am not interested in relitigating the past. What's done is done. What I am interested in is the future, and what that future will look like. Sloane blinked, thrown off by my directness. What do you mean? I mean that things are going to change. I will no longer accept being treated as an afterthought in my own son's life. I will no longer tolerate being excluded from family events while your mother is welcomed with open arms. I will no longer pretend that everything is fine when it clearly is not. I don't think that's a fair characterization, she started, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. You came here to clear the air, so let's clear it. You have spent 3 years making me feel unwelcome in Graham's life. Whether that was intentional or not, that was the result. I made the mistake of accepting it, of hoping things would improve, of putting my son's comfort above my own dignity. That mistake ends now. Sloane's mask slipped for just a moment. I saw anger flash in her eyes, the fury of someone who was not used to being challenged. But she collected herself quickly, smoothing her expression back into careful neutrality. What exactly do you want, Delphine? Respect, I said simply. Basic human respect. I want to be included in holidays and family gatherings. I want my son to feel free to call me without worrying about your reaction. I want to be treated as a member of this family, not as an inconvenience to be managed. And if I can't give you that, I met her eyes directly. Then I will accept it, and I will build a life that doesn't include you. I have money, Sloane. I have friends. I have interests and passions, and a man in Dublin who thinks I'm wonderful. I do not need your approval or your inclusion to be happy. I would prefer to have a relationship with my son and his wife, but I will not beg for it, and I will not sacrifice my self-respect to obtain it. Something shifted in Sloane's expression. I had surprised her. She had expected me to plead, to negotiate, to meet her halfway in a compromise that would inevitably favor her. She had not expected me to be willing to walk away. Graham loves you, she said finally. I know that. I know it too. The question is whether that love will translate into action, or whether it will remain just a feeling that never changes anything. Sloane was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller somehow, less certain. My mother always told me that mothers-in-law were competition, that they would try to come between a wife and her husband, that I needed to establish my position early and defend it. I was never your competition, Sloane. I was never trying to come between you and Graham. I just wanted to remain part of his life. I see that now. She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. I think I was so focused on building my own family that I forgot you were already his family, that you had been his family for 30 years before I came along. It was not an apology. Not exactly. But it was an acknowledgement, and that was more than I had ever received from her before. I'm not asking you to love me, I said. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm asking you to treat me with the basic courtesy you would extend to any other person. Can you do that? She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something genuine in her eyes. Not warmth exactly, but something approaching honesty. I can try, she said. I can't promise it will be perfect. I can't promise my mother won't make things difficult, but I can try. That's all I'm asking. She left shortly after that, and I was alone again in my quiet house. But the silence felt different now. Not empty, but peaceful. I had said what needed to be said. I had drawn my lines and stated my terms. Whatever happened next was up to them. The weeks that followed brought small changes. Graham called more often, and not just when he needed something. He started asking about my life, my plans, my interests. He mentioned Theo without awkwardness, even asked when he might meet him. Baby steps, but steps nonetheless. Sloane remained cordial but distant, which was fine with me. We would never be close, and I had made my peace with that. What mattered was that she no longer actively worked to exclude me. When Easter came around, I received an invitation to dinner at their apartment. A real invitation, extended weeks in advance, with no last-minute cancellation. Theo came to visit in February, just as we had planned. He stayed for 10 days, and we explored Connecticut together, visited museums in New York, cooked dinners in my kitchen. Graham came for lunch one afternoon and shook Theo's hand with genuine warmth. I watched my son and whatever Theo was, talk about literature and travel and life, and I felt something I had not felt in years: hope. In the spring, I flew to Dublin. Theo showed me his city, introduced me to his friends, took me to the places that had shaped his life. We walked along the coast and talked about the future, about what we wanted from whatever years we had left. We did not make grand promises or dramatic declarations. We simply agreed to keep showing up for each other, to keep choosing each other, one day at a time. I am writing this now from my study in Greenwich, looking out at the garden Robert and I planted together 20 years ago. The roses are blooming, the way they do every June, and I am thinking about how much has changed since last Christmas. A year ago, I was invisible, forgotten, resigned to a life of diminished expectations. Now I am seen. Now I am valued. Now I am living instead of just existing. Sloane taught me something, though she never intended to. She taught me that I had been complicit in my own erasure. I had accepted less than I deserved because I was afraid of losing what little I had. But you cannot lose what was never really yours. Graham's love, conditional and passive as it was, would not have sustained me forever. I needed to find my own source of strength, my own reasons for living, my own definition of happiness that did not depend on anyone else's permission. Vienna gave me that. Theo gave me that. But mostly, I gave it to myself. I am Delphine Mercer. I am 58 years old. I built an empire, buried a husband, and survived a daughter-in-law who tried to erase me from my own family. I spent Christmas alone in Vienna and found more joy in that solitude than I had found in years of trying to belong where I was not wanted. And now, finally, I am home. Not in a house or a city, but in myself, in the woman I was always meant to be. In the life I am still building, one unexpected day at a time. Some stories end with revenge. Mine ends with something better. It ends with freedom.